right. Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory be unto Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Makar Kudash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone that rule well. Peace, salutations, and blessings be unto the hopeful elect, pushing his truth in sincerity throughout the four corners of the globe, in the sincere hopes of being delivered in these last days. All right, this is the brother Yakanan from the GMS England branch. Now I want to do a brief video, a brief lesson based upon this information that I've just come across, as you can see here on the screen. Now this is from the GreekReporter.com, and as you can see, it reads: Trump orders new federal buildings to be built in ancient Greek and Roman style. Okay? Trump orders new federal buildings to be built in ancient Greek and Roman style. And this is dated August 30th, 2025. All right? And a few weeks ago now, I had done a video also concerning Donald Trump and how he had ordered for a substantial area of the Oval Office, in the White House, to be decorated in gold. Okay? And I found that very interesting because when you do a little research, you find out that Nero, who, in the spirit is, Donald Trump, Nero Caesar, he had an actual gold palace, all right? And I believe that gold palace, it was pronounced Domus Aurea, okay? Domus Aurea, all right? And that was known as Nero's gold palace. So that's definitely no coincidence that Trump would make such a, peculiar request for decoration of the Oval Office in the White House to be, gold. Okay? Because that's synonymous, really with Nero Caesar, having a gold, palace. Okay? And again, that was in the news. There was a lot of different reputable sources that covered that particular information, all right, which I found very interesting. But again, it shows you that as we teach, reincarnation is in the Bible, not only concerning people, but concerning, kingdoms, okay? And let's get the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 1 and verse 9. All right. Now it says here, the thing that have been is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. Okay. Now that concerns people. All right. Because we are reincarnated. We've been here before. Okay. Now you have new flesh, but your spirit, okay, your spirit has been here, many times, in different houses of flesh. Okay? And verse 10 says, is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new? It have been already of old time, which was before us. Okay? And as we're going to go into in this article, the ancient Roman Empire is now reincarnated, all right, in Babylon the Great, which is America today. Okay? The ancient Roman Empire as a kingdom is reincarnated in Babylon the Great, which is America today. Okay? So all of these things that are transpiring, in these last days, all of these, as they would say in the world, so-called coincidences, they're really not coincidences. Okay? This is biblical prophecy playing out. Okay? This is biblical prophecy playing out in these last days. And, there's no coincidences. It's only, the will of the Heavenly Father, Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, being played out, in these last days. Okay? So let's go back to the to the article. And again, this is from the GreekReporter.com. So it says Trump orders new federal buildings to be built in ancient Greek and Roman style. Now, why ancient Greek and Roman style in particular? Okay. Now, these were both, Edomite rulerships. Okay. The Greeks were Edomites and the Romans were Edomites. Okay. These are both Edomite nations. Okay. Now, you had, the leopard, Alexander the Creep. Okay, the Grecian Empire, okay, and then you had the Roman Empire, which was the dragon. Okay, this is no coincidence. All right, this is no coincidence at all that these things are playing out upon the earth. All right, now it says U.S. President Donald Trump ordered all new federal buildings to be built in ancient Greek and Roman architecture style to visually connect our contemporary republic with the antecedents of democracy, okay? And it says in an executive order titled Making Federal Architecture Beautiful Again, the president urges architects and engineers who will design federal buildings from now on to make them using a blueprint, the monumental ancient Greek and Roman architecture, okay? So he wants to use the blueprint of the ancient Greek and Roman architecture, all right? The aim is that federal buildings will bring to mind the birth of democracy and the establishment of the United States based on those great ideals, just as George Washington and Thomas Jefferson modeled the Capitol building and the White House, okay? So they're bringing back, all right, the spirit of ancient Greek and, more importantly, the ancient Roman Empire. All right, and again, this is biblical prophecy. All right, unfolding right before your eyes, and it shows you that this devil, all right, in his great pride, and boasting against Yahweh Shem Yahushai, is trying to fully bring back that vibration, fully bring back that energy, before he goes down. Okay. He's bringing out, every technique. He's bringing out every method to try and hold on to the former, glory. Okay. But as we can see, through biblical prophecy, his kingdom is dwindling. His power is waning, and his influence that he once had, over the world is diminishing. Okay, and there's nothing that he can do about that, all right? Because the Lord, as it tells us in the book of Job, the Lord set bounds that they cannot pass, all right? There's a threshold on the kingdom of Esau, Edom, all right? There's a time limit, okay? And now we're starting to see, the Lord has pulled the plug on this devil's kingdom, all right? And as Elder Apostle Gabar used to say, their kingdom is spiraling the drain, okay? The kingdom of Esau, Edom, in these last days is spiraling the drain. And for those that, can spiritually see what's happening upon the earth, you can clearly see that this kingdom is spiraling the drain. Okay? And that's why it tells us in 2nd Esdras, the 9th chapter, to measure, the time diligently. Okay? So we survey what's happening and we filter the events through the Holy Scriptures. All right, that's what we do via the, these videos. That's what we do on the highways and the byways. And that gives us an indication as to where we are concerning the end of this man's kingdom. Okay. Now you can also go on, the whitehouse.gov website, and you can see it right here. It says making federal architecture beautiful again. All right. Now I want to go into the part where it goes into the policy, and I also want to go into the part where it goes into the classical architecture. All right. All right, so let's go into the policy bit first, and then we'll go into the classical architecture. All right, so it says here, policy, section 2, it says applicable federal public buildings should uplift and beautify public spaces. inspire the human spirit, ennoble the United States, and command respect from the general public. They should also be visually identifiable as civic buildings and as appropriate respect regional agricultural heritage. Architecture, particularly traditional and classical architecture, that meets the criteria set forth in this subsection is the preferred architecture for applicable federal public buildings. In the District of Columbia, classical architecture shall be the preferred and default architecture for federal public buildings, absent exceptional factors necessitating another kind of architecture. Okay, so they're going into the architecture and how they want it to, boost the human spirit, inspire the human spirit, and they want to basically, bring back that vibration, of the ancient Greek Empire and the ancient Roman Empire, which again are Edomite empires. Okay, so really, when you delve into this stuff, this is witchcraft. All right, this is actually witchcraft, because many of these buildings, they have particular symbolism on them. Okay, and these things affect the people. Okay, and that's why it's so important for them to boost this vibration and to have these buildings, that hover over the people, in place. All right, and in certain coordinates, so on and so forth. It's all done by design on the left-hand side. Okay, on the left-hand side. Now let's go to the part where it says classical architecture. So it says means the architectural tradition derived from the forms, principles, and vocabulary of the architecture of Greek and Roman antiquity, and as later developed and expanded upon by such Renaissance architects as Alberti, Brunelleschi, all right, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and Michelangelo and Palladio, such Enlightenment masters as Robert Adam, John Soane, and Christopher Wren, such 19th century architects as Benjamin Henry, all right, and it goes through all of the names, but what I want to zone in on is where it says the Renaissance architects, okay? Because as we know, the Renaissance is when Esau, came back into power. All right, now let's get that right quick. Excuse me, my throat is very sore. I'm coming down with something. This is Revelation chapter 20, and we'll start from the top. Revelation chapter 20 and verse 1. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. Okay, so Esau, Edom, okay, the nation of Esau, Edom, they were bound, 1,000 years. Okay. Verse 3, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years shall be fulfilled, and after that he must be loosed a little season. Okay, so he is now ruling and living in that time of that little season. All right, before he goes down, before he's destroyed, before Yahushua comes back and destroys him and his establishment and his power and his kingdom ultimately. Okay, so he is now existing, living in his little season that's being granted unto him through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shem Yahushua. Okay, now from there, let's go to I had it loaded up here. I wanted to go into the the word Renaissance, okay? Because the time of him coming back, that's known as the Renaissance period, okay? When Esau's influence and his way of being, was reinstated, if you will, upon the earth to deceive the nations. Okay. Now it says Renaissance. This is the Renaissance is a period of history and a European cultural movement covering the 15th and 16th centuries. It marked the transition from the Middle Ages, which is the Dark Ages, which was when Jake was ruling, to modernity, and was characterized by an effort to revive and surpass the ideas and achievements of classical antiquity, associated with great social change in most fields and disciplines, including art, architecture, politics. All right. And what we're dealing with here in this lesson, we're dealing with architecture. All right. Because we're dealing with these buildings and how he wants to, have the buildings, fashioned after ancient Greek and ancient Rome, design. All right. So that's architecture, as we can see here. Okay. So he's bringing about, that spirit of ancient, Greek and the ancient Rome. Okay. He's bringing about that spirit all over again. And again, this is biblical prophecy, man. Okay. Now it says here, let's go back to the article. And again, this is on the whitehouse.gov website. So it says classical architecture means the architectural tradition derived from the forms, principles, and vocabulary of the architecture of Greek and Roman antiquity, and as later developed and expanded upon by such Renaissance architects. All right. So again, it goes into the Renaissance, man. So they're channeling, the spirit of the Renaissance. All right. And the scriptures tell us, their inner thought is that their houses shall continue forever. So this is Esau's way of trying to, continue forever. All right. Bringing, these old, paths, of ancient Greek and ancient Rome, back to life, right? Which is a part of the image of the beast. Okay, the revival of the ancient Roman Empire. Okay, so that's just something I wanted to highlight. Now, from there, let's now go to Revelation 13, and we'll get straight to the point. This is Revelation 13, and we'll go to we'll start at verse 11. All right, this is Revelation 13 and verse 11, and as you can see in the title there, it says the beast from the earth. Okay, and it reads Revelation 13 and verse 11, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. Okay, so that beast, all right, coming up out of the earth, that's speaking about America. Okay, that's speaking about Babylon the Great, which is America. And then it says he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. All right, now the two horns, that goes into their two-party system. Now in ancient Rome, you had the plebeians and you had the patricians, and now you have the Democrats and you have the Republicans. All right, the Republicans. So that system is reincarnated. All right, that system has now carried on into this new system, which is in America, the two-party system. And it says, and he spake as a dragon, and that goes into the Athenian lawgiver. I believe his name was Draco. Okay, and he was known for issuing very harsh laws. All right, that's where you get the term draconian. Okay, draconian law, very harsh, very bitter laws. Okay, and verse 12 says, and he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Okay, now let's break that down. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him. That's talking about the ancient Roman Empire, man. Okay, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Okay, now again, their deadly wound was healed when? During the time of the Renaissance period. Okay, the Roman Empire was healed through the Renaissance period. Okay, where, you know, they were given that little season to rule upon the earth, which is the little season that they're currently thriving and living in right now. Okay? So again, and he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. Now, how are people worshipping, you know, the image of the first beast? Because he's reincarnated, you know, the ways of ancient Rome upon the earth. You know, the wine, you know, the philosophies, okay, the two-party system, adultery, you know, religion, the high unholy days that you have in this society, you know, the alphabet agenda, okay? This is, you know, the image and the ways of the ancient Roman Empire, but reinstated, you know, in Babylon the Great, you know, and that vibration has spread throughout the four corners of the globe, okay? And it says, and he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Going into his nuclear, you know, technology, you know, ICBM missiles, okay, the atomic bomb, okay, you know, their blessing was the sword, you know, going back to the book of Genesis, man, Esau was blessed with the sword, okay, and then the modern day sword, you know, concerning, you know, their highest might, you know, would be their missiles, you know, them ICBM missiles, the intercontinental ballistic missiles, man, okay, that's the sword that's going to be used ultimately to destroy him also, all right. So it says, and he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell upon the earth that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by the sword and did live, which again is the ancient Roman Empire that had the wound by the sword but did live. How is it living? Through America, all right? Babylon the Great, all right? It's living and it's breathing and it's thriving today, okay? Now also, you know, the miracles that goes into his technology, all right? And his key and most substantial part of that technology is going to be what? The MOTB, all right, that CHIP that he wants to put inside the people. Okay, that's part of his miracles. Okay. Now verse 15 said, and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Okay, so again, and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast. And again, how is he giving life to the image of the beast? Okay, because the ancient Roman Empire and the ways of the ancient Roman Empire, the philosophies of the ancient Roman Empire, the lifestyle, all right, is thriving today, you know, through America, all right, through Babylon the Great. And people are subscribing to that way of life. And the ultimate way of subscribing to that life, you know, very shortly is going to be by, you know, having that MOTB, you know, that device impaled within you. Okay? That basically unifies you on the ultimate level to Esau, Edom, and his beast system. You know, when you take that mark. And that's why the judgment in Revelation 14 for taking that mark is what? Death. Okay, there's no coming back from that. All right, when you ultimately link yourself to Esau, Edom, you know, through this beast system via that mark, the charagma, okay, that's going to be it for you. Okay, that's the last straw. Okay, so again, and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Okay, so again, going into the mark, going into that device, and you're not going to be able to buy or sell or function on the grid of Esau, Edom, you know, without that mark. Okay? But again, you know, the main thing I wanted to bring out, you know, was concerning, we'll go to it again, the architectural, you know, segment, you know, of this particular, you know, article. And, you know, executive order, you know, that's been, you know, sent out there by, you know, DJ Trump, which again shows you that, you know, the ancient Roman Empire is revived through Babylon the Great, which is America. Okay, and that's why these things are transpiring. So with that, Lord willing, this lesson, was edifying. And until the next time, I'll say shalom.